The sports world has taken notice of the anti-racism protests that have sprung up across the United States and in Canada. And this week, the NFL commissioner apologized for the league's handling of the peaceful protests started by quarterback Colin Kaepernick when he was kneeling during the national anthem. And in the National Hockey League, teams and players have also vowed to do better in terms of addressing racism. For more on that part of the story, we have invited Kevin Weekes onto the program. He's a former NHL goalie and now lead analyst on NHL Network. He joins us now from Carlstadt, New Jersey. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Kevin, I'm going to read a quote back to you, your quote, in terms of how you've had to deal with racism in hockey. The higher up I got in hockey, the more race started to become a factor. And I started realizing that for me, I was walking over Niagara Falls on a tightrope with no safety net. That is quite a statement, quite visual, quite powerful. What did you mean when you said that?
Exactly that. Growing up in Toronto, I was fortunate. Two great parents, my mom and dad, my younger sister, extended family, loved ones and friends that were always very supportive. They supported me as a young 6-year-old boy that aspired to play in the NHL, growing up at St. Clair and Christie, moving to Scarborough, and, being one of the few kids in the neighborhood that went on to play. I know that there's other guys that came before me. There are other women that came before me that played for Team Canada, but myself, Anson Carter in our neighborhood, Chris Draper, Jason Daw, there are a few of us that went on to play in the NHL and play in the league a very long time. But when I got to the OHL, I noticed that it started to become a factor. Specifically, there's certain players that would say certain things on the ice. I remember we played one game in the OHL specifically when the opposing center iceman said to the ref at the opening faceoff, well, why are we even doing a faceoff? Why don't we do a jump ball? You have all these black guys on the ice. So that was the type of thing. And then systemically, in certain instances, there's pay disparity, there's opportunity disparity. If you stand up for yourself or you defend yourself, then they're going to say that you have a bad attitude or you're a bad egg, which couldn't be further from the truth. So all that to say, the higher I climbed, not when I was in the minors, but certainly when I was in the OHL and at times in the NHL, for example, 2002, our run to the Stanley Cup final with the Carolina Hurricanes at that time. But in our second round, we played the Montreal Canadiens, the world-class Montreal Canadiens, the winningest franchise in NHL history, I should say, with the most Stanley Cups. And there was a fan that threw a banana on the ice at me, and it wasn't the first time. But we lost that game in overtime, and I literally felt the banana rain down. So nobody should have to ever deal with that. So that's at the NHL level and at the OHL level. But grassroots, all the kids, all the parents, every guardian and sibling, player, opposing player, teammate, it needs to be safe from grassroots all the way up to pro sports. Every sporting venue needs to be safe.
So, Kevin, let me ask you this, because people are going to hear you, and there will be some folks who will say, well, that guy who made the comment about let's just play basketball instead, it's just a joke. Why can't you have a sense of humor about it? Or, hey, you're a professional athlete. You're going to get ribbed. People are going to say comments to you. Help someone understand what that does to you as an individual, to have those comments said to you, to have a banana peel thrown at you.
Don't degrade people based on what part of the city, what part of the country they come from, how many vowels are in their parents' last name, what the hue is of their skin, their gender, their sexual orientation. You could always talk a lot of smack and talk a lot of BS out there in any sporting platform. But one thing that needs to be sanctified is where people come from, who they are, their cultural background, their religion. All those things are off limits. Everybody should be made to feel welcome. And, there are a lot of people that emigrate to North America for different reasons. And people want to live the North American dream. And as the best continent in certain respects, we have to be that. There's a responsibility. And you can't say that about a player of color or an Italian player, and then all of a sudden that Italian-Canadian player, let's say Roberto Luongo, is in net 2010 in the Olympics in Vancouver, and you're cheering for him. You can't say that about black people or black players, and then you're saying we the North for the Toronto Raptors, and yet still you're yelling racial epithets at your son or daughter's game at Chesswood Arena in the GTHL as an example. So I've gotten so many texts from current NHL players that are offering help, current NHL coaches, general managers, team owners that are offering to help. So, and some of them that have already been doing great work, by the way, like the great Sidney Crosby, just to name one of the many. Jonathan Toews, also the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. But we have a lot of work to do as a sport by way of inclusion.
Let me talk to you about that as well, Kevin, because rightly or wrongly, there is this perception that hockey, certainly professional hockey, overwhelmingly is a white sport. You don't necessarily say that about basketball or football at the professional level. Even baseball is very diverse, but it doesn't feel that way for hockey. So does hockey have more to prove when it comes to the issue of anti-racism?
We do. We have to make every venue safe. My parents shouldn't, or my sister, or my loved one, none of my friends, nobody deserves to hear racial epithets screamed at them in their place of work or recreation. Just nobody deserves to have that. And we have to create a safe haven by way of every sporting venue, whether it's Agincourt Baseball Park, St. Mike's Arena back home in Toronto, wherever it is across the country, Burnaby 8 rinks in Vancouver, BC. It has to be safe because I believe in the power of possibility. I'm a living example of the power of possibility and what things can happen when you work hard, when you're dedicated, when you have a great support system behind you. And there's a little girl that's watching this right now that may very well become the next great hockey player for Canada. She may very well become the next great shoulder surgeon who is practicing either in Canada or here in the United States. I believe in the power of possibility, and sport is connective tissue. It needs to be that. It unifies the communities in which we live in, and it should continue to do that. And, you know, you can look at somebody like Jeffrey Orridge, who ran our CBC Sports for years and was a CFL commissioner, first black commissioner in pro sports history. And some of the owners didn't really deal very well with him, didn't take kindly to him establishing that and becoming that. So let's continue to realize that we have a lot of great people back home from every different background. You don't have to be Drake. You don't have to be Celine Dion. You don't have to be the great Steve Nash. We have a lot of world-class people back home. And when I talk about the power of possibility, there is a young girl, there is a young boy right now, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, whose lives can be transformed by way of them having that opportunity and working hard to make their dreams come true. We can't marginalize people any further.
I hear you. I don't want us to run out of time, so very quickly,
Sure.
Have things gotten better over the course of your career? Have you noticed things have gotten better in terms of anti-racism? And do you think what's happening both in Canada and the U.S. right now is going to make things better?
Haven't gotten better and haven't been as good enough as they need to be. Matthew, who's a coach of the Pickering Panthers, minor midget back home, has been messaging me for the 6 players of color on his team that have been subjected to racial epithets. And again, when you respond, no matter how articulately, no matter how classy you respond, they say that there's a problem. So again, things have a long way to get better. I love our sport. I echo the great Wayne Gretzky. Everything my family and I have, we owe to this great game. We've given our souls to this game. I'll continue to do that. But we need to improve our level of inclusion and tolerance. The only supremacy is for the winners. I've been on a team that went to a Stanley Cup final. We lost it in 2002. But every year since I started broadcasting, I earned the right to broadcast a Stanley Cup final. That's where the supremacy lies, with the team that wins, not by way of the color of your skin and or by what part of the country you do or don't come from. That's not where it's at. It's about the winners, and you win, hey, no problem. You can drink the champagne. But aside from that, we want to celebrate everybody. We want to be inclusive, and that's what we need to do as a sport as we continue to grow forward. I'm a big fan of Commissioner Bettman. He's been great to me as well. But that being said, from our league standpoint, and more importantly, grassroots, both back home and here in the United States, have to be inclusionary. We need as many girls and boys playing this game and as many adult rec players playing the game and loving it and feeling welcome in the game. And I want to see zero tolerance policy for anything but that. Administrator, coach, opposing parent, whatever the case may be, throw them out, give them a ban, and let's continue to encourage our young girls and boys to play this great sport.
Okay, let's leave it on that note. Kevin, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. God bless.
Same to you. Kevin Weekes is a former NHL goalie and lead analyst on NHL Network. He joined us from Carlstadt, New Jersey.